MSC, I hope you are doing well. I just wanted to send over a video as I am aware I mentioned something to you over our voice note. We never actually had a chance to go through it in our session yesterday. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about the kind of, I don't know, let's call it the three line pricing structure. This is a new framework that I've just made. But it's essentially something I can't remember where I was taught it, but there's basically three lines that you want to think about when it comes to pricing anything. And the kind of bottom line, the baseline, is your costs, right? Or yeah, let's call it the cost. So that's the kind of like the most basic level. That's the thing that's at the very bottom that you want to think about in terms of like being able to price anything, right? What does it actually cost to deliver whatever your thing is? Let's say, for example, if I am selling this water bottle, if it costs, let's say £3, then the next thing that I want to kind of like compare that to is the price that I charge, right? So this is, let's say, let me do that again properly. So this is the price I charge. And the bigger the distance between the price I charge and the cost it is for me, the more profitable something is. If it costs me £3 to make this and I sell this for £4, it doesn't really make me that much profit, right? But if I could sell it for £10, that'd be really good, right? Because then there's a bigger gap between the price and my cost, right? Very, very basic, very simple. Okay. Now the next line is the most important line in my eyes, right? And this is what we call the value line, right? Now, the value line, I'm going to change the color for this one. The value line, let's say it's here. Sorry, I can't draw a straight line to save my life, right? Um, but let's call that the value line. So again, what you want to do with this is actually increase the distance between these two. If let's say it costs me £10, but the value that I've associated it with in my mind is £30, that's a big difference between the value that I think it has and the price that I paid for it. Like if I'm using this every single day for the rest of my life to drink water from, it's a lot more valuable than £10. You know what I mean? So this is the kind of this is a really important section that I think like you can essentially put it down to like customer surplus or goodwill or enjoyment or again like value, right? So what I mean by that is let's just call it goodwill. If the difference between the price and the value is really big, so let's say even if we just consider our sessions, right? I feel like you really value our sessions, and because what you're paying for and what you're getting out the other side, you're like, okay, well, I'm getting loads for what I'm paying for. You're like, okay, I feel really positively about Gurutma. I feel really positively about the sessions. So what I'm doing is I am telling other people about it, right? I'm staying with you for longer. I'm getting so you help me to get more referrals and you're more willing to stay with me. And also you're more likely to upgrade, right? So similarly, if we take it back to the bottle example, if I'm like, oh wow, this is a really well made, really high quality bottle, I will be more likely to go to this company again and buy again because I'm really happy and I feel like the value that I received was really high or really good for the price. Yeah. So when you're thinking about what you're pricing at, like really, we have to sit and think about what this actually looks like. Okay. Now, when we think about these things, the other factor to consider is if you're kind of early stage, right? Then what we need to try and understand is like, well, what actually is this, right? Because at the moment you might be pricing lower than what you think you should be pricing at. Okay, you might feel like the value you can deliver is higher. But the problem is that we haven't actually defined the value of your service yet. So the price, we can't say for sure. We can't anchor it anywhere because realistically, it should be related to the value, right? We want to value, price, and sorry, we want to anchor price to value. This is actually something that I've just thought of for the first time, right? Most businesses, what they do and the reason why they fail is that they price in relation to cost. What you want to do is price in relation to value, right? How much value am I getting out of the service? So let's say I can take someone because I'm a business coach. Let's say I take someone who's never done anything in business to making 50K a month. Okay. That's really, really valuable. But let's say it only costs me £10 to do, right? Extreme scenario. It costs me £10 to do, but the value is £50,000, okay, a month. What some people will think is like, oh, well, it costs me £10, so why don't I charge £20, which means that I've doubled I've doubled the actual cost, right? I've doubled the gap between here. So let me actually just put this in numbers so it's easier to follow, right? You got £10 and equals to the price is £20. And let's be a little bit more realistic with the value. Let's say I help someone to make £100, right? Most people will think about their cost and think, okay, well, how much profit do I want to make on my cost? And it's like, okay, I'm happy to make £20 because that means I spent 10 and got 20 back, right? Whereas realistically, if you're smart, you don't look at the cost, right? You make sure that your cost is low, but what you look at is the value, right? And this is how big brands get you. It doesn't cost them, like, let's say you're buying a £200 Gucci t-shirt. It doesn't cost them £200 to make. It doesn't cost them £150 to make. It costs them like £10 to make. But they price it close to the value that you have, and the value is associated with the status of having that thing. Okay. So when it comes to you and developing your service, the question that you need to be asking yourself is not how much does it cost me, right? This is not important. Okay. What's important is this. Oh, what is important is this. Yeah. What are people actually getting out of it? What's the value? How do people feel? How do people actually perceive the skills that you've given them? How do people perceive the outcome that they've had from working with you? Okay. So getting back to why I am a fan of charging slightly cheaper than you might need to. Okay. The reason why is because if you're planning on being in business for any period of time, what's going to happen is let me get rid of these numbers. Actually, no, they're fine. Right. Let What's going to happen is let's say you feel like, oh, well, I'm worth, I don't know, £80, right? My service is worth £80. Okay. And then instead of saying £20, your service is worth £80. But the problem is when you start out, you actually don't even know what your value is, right? There's a big question mark of like, how valuable are my services? Because you haven't tested it out, you haven't got a ton of testimonials, you don't actually know what your service is worth. So what you end up risking is essentially taking this line of price and end up putting it really close to value, right? And it might even sometimes go over value. So let's say you're charging someone £80, right? That's going to be a pound sign. Really good. Um, but they feel like they're only getting £60 worth of value. You've mugged yourself off, and like that's like a really strong reason to leave your service, right? So what we want to do is make sure that when we're talking about pricing, it's better to underprice yourself sometimes, right? And I know this is controversial, right? It's better to underprice yourself. Let's say at £50, if you know that your service might be between £60 to £120. And I know that these numbers aren't related to your service at all, right? Like this isn't anything in terms of like the price of your service, but hopefully it gives you an understanding of like what I'm talking about in terms of the numbers, right? You're better to underprice. And the reason why it's better to underprice is because let's say you're looking to let's say you're looking to keep this customer on for a long time, you want to stay at a lower price so they're less likely to quit, so they're more likely to refer, so they're more likely to pay you more in the future, right? Because let's say you work with someone for £50 and it turns out you were right all along and your service is actually worth £500 per month, right? And you say, hey, you're paying me £50 per month, but my value is actually £500 per month. If you then go to that person and say, look, my price is increasing from £50 to, let's say, your new price, the blue line that we're going to do, is going to be new price is going to be £100 per month. You can double your pricing, right? As long as there's enough of a gap between the value and your new price. And it's okay, and customers will be happy with it because they understand what the value is, which is the most important part. So when you're early stage, a lot of the time you don't know what your value is. You don't actually know what you're trying to build. You don't know what your customers value. But if you play your cards right and you actually undercharge so you can figure out what your value is and then actually go up and charge more and more and more, then you box out all the customers that might be looking to pay you. Like later down the line, there might be some people be like, I can only pay um like £50 a month, right? Let's say they can only pay you like £30 a month. Let's say they can only pay you £90 a month. You don't care because everything underneath this you can say no to because you know that there's enough of a gap between your value and your new price to say, well, this is actually my base fee now, right? Because you've got a much better understanding of that. This is like basic business thought processes, but it takes a lot to grasp, right? It's not easy to think about this kind of stuff, right? But again, the concept that I want to get across to you is that you basically want to try and make sure at all times your cost is as low as possible, right? Your price is as high, as far away from your cost as possible, right? And also simultaneously, the value and price as far away as possible, right? Because this is also the thing, right? Just to give you an example, we had a couple emails messed up over the past couple of days, right? Like there's just been some problems with the systems, there's just been some things that we haven't managed to sort out. So we ended up having a couple of issues. And let's say someone's paying £500 a month for our service. Sorry, yeah. Let's say the value of our service is £2,000 and someone's paying us £500 a month for our service, right? If we have an issue with an email, they might be so mad that the value in their head drops to £1,900 per month. Like this is no longer as valuable as it was before because you messed up a couple emails, correct, right? So now it's dropped in value by £100. But who the hell cares? There's still a over 3x return or 3x value perception on what we're actually providing. So it gives us much more of a cushion to deal with. I'm not stressed that if something bad happens or if we mess something up, then people are going to be like, oh my God, the service isn't worth it anymore. Because there's such a big cushion. You want to feel good when you go to bed at night. You don't want to worry about whether or not customers are going to cancel. Make this bigger, man, because that's where it's going to come from. And that's what I've been trying to get you to do with the current customers. Just have a good base, make sure that customers are really happy. Then you can start increasing your price. And no one's going to complain because the value that they get off the back of it is so high. Yeah. So hopefully this makes sense. I hope it answers a lot of the questions that you might have around price. I 100% want you to get you to increase your price over the coming weeks, over the coming months. But I think it's much more important for us to understand what's the value that you actually provide. How do we quantify that value? How do we prove that value through testimonials, through the service that we deliver? And then worry about, okay, well, what does this actually look like? Yeah. I hope you don't mind as well. I might post this online to make this into a little video to share with other people. I'm sure it's going to be valuable for them as well to learn a little bit more about pricing. But I hope this makes sense to you. And if you've got any questions about it, definitely just drop me a message.